understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I am your host, Namdi Oswagu. Today's a solo show. I'm going to do something really talking about today. The topic is what you need to know about open banking in the U.S. It's coming in the fall. We're going to dive into that and the regulations and the regulatory body. We're going to go into the different aspects of it. We had previous shows on open banking, but that was more on a global side. It's new to the U.S. and it's going to be a regulatory standard in the fall. We're going to get into that. Before we jump into open banking and today's topic, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and we also have a link going on from Instagram. My guy Kev just joined. What's up, brother? Okay, so on that note, some other housekeeping stuff, right? You want to drop in comments, feel free. You comment on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitch, you'll be part of the show, and I'll see your comments and I can add them to the video. If you comment on Instagram, I'll just read it out. And on Instagram, if you want to go live to the Tech Behind FinTech and click on one of the links, you'll go to the YouTube link and you also can be part of the show. So on that note, I think it is time to jump into today's topic. What is open banking? And pretty cool discussion. It's always something like I'm interested in because I also have some slides going on. So we're gonna show you some cool stuff that I put together. So basically, right, what's open banking? It refers to a banking practice that provides third-party financial service providers open access to consumer banking, transaction, other financial data from banks and non-banks via an API application programming interface. It promotes innovation, enhances transparency, and improves consumer choices in financial services markets. So that's a textbook definition, right? But in general, and it was so interesting because the show we had last year in which we talked about open banking with a person who led the effort in Nigeria really got into the details. And also, I'm going to post a link to that episode as well. But it's bigger than just access to data, right? Because you do that now, if you think about it. We have different applications that you use that connects via some sort of API into your into certain banks, right? So, you have applications like Venmo, where, it connects to, you have a bank account behind it, whether you have Cash App, whether you have a slew of different fintech services that you use. What I learned from the past episode about open banking is also about a standard. So the question is, it's not only about, all right, would the third-party fintechs have access to this data from financial institution, but is there some sort of standard which allows all of the different financial institutions and the third-party systems to interact, right? And one of the questions that I posed to the expert on this in another episode was, what is the incentive? Like, why would a bank want to get access to one of their competitors and so forth? And a good analogy that we talked about was it's almost like the internet, right? And that's the standard, different people on it. But if you isolate yourself out of it, then you're out of the loop, right? You can't grow. So, and you have various competitors. So it's interesting. You're in the network now. We kind of, as you start interacting, as you start, your users now have access to various services, including yours. The entire ecosystem grows. If you exclude yourself out of it, then you don't grow. But in any event, right? Why it's so important to the U.S. is that there is a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So they call them CFPB, right? For short. And essentially, what they have a rule set that's going to be finalized this fall of 2024 or 2024 that will require financial institutions across the country to provide access to customer financial data for checking, savings, credit card accounts, prepaid cards, digital wallets, and so forth. So once that comes into and understand, right, there are about from reading this, about like 8,000 financial institutions in the US. Let me confirm that number. It was a very interesting point. Yeah. Oh, well, there are over 8,000 financial institutions in the US, few of which have large technology budgets, and most of which rely on vendors like Fiserv, Finastra, and Jack Henry for their technology needs. So, that's another point, right? Well, you have these various financial institutions. You have, the large financial institutions, like, them, like the JP Morgans of the world, and Chase and TD. You have really smaller community banks and other ones that might not have the same robust technology services. So they rely on back end vendors like Fiserv, Fizz, and Finastra. So it's important to get them on board as well with that, and that's like their core vendors. And it has to also align with the CFPB's requirement in order to comply. So it'll be really interesting to see all that. Let me jump into something so we can kind of see where open it was a really good part of the article in this white paper I downloaded on the status of it. Really interesting. I want to point it out so you kind of see the dynamic of this. I'm sorry, guys, on Instagram, you're not gonna be able to see my PowerPoint slides that I'm pointing out. So you can go to the techbehindfintech.com if you want to see it. But I just want to show you, we're kind of late to the wait, that's another slide. We're kind of late to the game, right? Because the concept of open banking is going on globally and been going on globally for quite a few years now, right? So if the guys who are you if you're on a podcast right now, well, if you're listening to this on a podcast in the future, because we have a podcast, you're not gonna be able to see what I'm posting. So I'm gonna read it out for those who can't visually see this, right? So countries around the world with open banking already, right? The UK, their legislation went into effect 2018. Israel, their what was in 2021. There were financial information services law. It states that banks' obligations related to sharing consumer data. Russia, 2021. South Korea, 2019. Japan, 2018. Theirs was the revision of the Banking Act. That was their the body that handles that. Taiwan, 2021. The Supervisory Committee approves the exchange of customer data. Hong Kong, 2018. Australia, 2019. That was the Australia Consumer and Competition Administration releases the consumer data right draft rules. India, 2016. Bahrain, 2022. Their Central Bank of Bahrain issues an open banking framework. Saudi Arabia, 2022. Nigeria, 2021. The Central Bank of Nigeria issues a regulatory framework for open banking. Um, Brazil, 2020. The Central Bank of Brazil publishes a joint resolution in open banking. Europe, 2018. That was the PSD2 legislation. We talked about this back, a while ago on the show. Turkey, 2020. the regulation on banks, information systems, and electronic banking goes into effect. So for the USA, right, there was a proposal by the CFPB issued in 2023, but now in 2024 it should go into effect. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, how many banks, when you look at the total number, are going to be prepared for this action? Let me put this back, get back here. So, I mean, it's just interesting to see, what's going on globally in regards to open banking, and in terms of the U.S., we're a little bit behind. So, let's talk about challenges, right? So, some of the major challenges that banks will face is really their legacy systems. How's that going to work out? So, that was like one of the big issues, especially when working with traditional banks in the past, is that they have a whole bunch of legacy applications, just basically older applications. It's hard to integrate to modern technology stack. So that's going to be an interesting hurdle, right? When we just start looking at overall, just read some notes here. Many banks operate in outdated legacy systems that are not readily compatible with agile API-driven approach required by open banking. Upgrading these systems is costly and complex, involving significant changes to their core banking platforms, data management, and security protocols. So that is going to be a very, very interesting challenge when this, and one of the things that I want to understand is, all right, this goes into effect in the fall. What happens when certain banks just don't comply? Hey, what's up, Alex? Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Talking about open banking here. It's in the US especially. I mean, we had other conversations about it in another other guests came on from around the world. But now in the fall, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is going to finalize this rule set for open banking. So what does that even mean for current banks? So a couple of things that we researched, in preparation for this show, just to understand it. Mind you, this is just like we're just talking overall about it. It's coming out. I'll post the article that this show is based on, so you guys can get a read about it yourself. And it has some links. Let me post that right now, actually. Post the article. It was a Forbes article. Cool. Let me post that right now. Make it part of the show. Forbes article on U.S. open banking. All right, articles there. It's sent out. Let me just make it part of the show. It's a Forbes article. So if you Google it, it's now part of the show. You can look at it on the screen. Taking it back off. All right. So, that's really like some interesting points that I want to understand is like what happens if certain banks that are not technically able to comply, what happens? What are going to be some of the repercussions of that? So that's going to be an interesting thing to find out when you start looking at like overall, like there are over 8,000 financial institutions, security as well. You know, there are obviously going to be some standards that they would have to adhere to, I would assume. So that'll take care of security. But I see that also as a major challenge. Not mentioned a lot in the articles that I read for the show regarding this initiative, but that's something that obviously because of my background, I always think about security. Oh, also, it's really important to know, right? For this open banking initiative, the CFPB that's proposing the rule set is only for personal accounts. They're not including business accounts. So, unlike open banking regulations in the UK and EU, the private sector hasn't addressed it either. It's only for most of these other open banking standards across the globe, across the world, started a lot earlier, as I mentioned, right, with the different dates. So they're a little bit more mature than us. So I think there includes their business accounts. But for this particular initiative coming out in the fall, directive or rule set, whatever you want to call it, It's not including business accounts, just personal accounts for open banking. Some of the questions that came up, right? What opportunities does open banking present for innovation in the financial services? So, open banking allows for the development of new financial products and services that can be more personalized, such as personalized budget tools, improved financial management apps, more competitive lending products. It also forces a more competitive environment where fintech startups can innovate without the need of traditional banking infrastructure. Very interesting, right? Everything's open. We have standards. We have access to data. There could be some creative apps that come from that initiative. One of the Another question that came up: How are U.S. banks and financial institutions? How prepared are U.S. banks and financial institutions for the transition to open banking? So there was a study on the CCG's Catalyst Banking Stability Innovation Study of 2023. Only 17% of US bank executives surveyed are committed to providing open data access to third parties, indicating a cautious approach. However, larger banks are more likely prepared due to their resources, whereas smaller banks may depend heavily on third party providers like core banking vendors to comply. So we mentioned those core banking vendors earlier, like Jack Henry, Fiserv, Finastra, and different things. So you could probably see a lot of the smaller banks without a lot of technical resources relying on their third party vendors to help them comply to this particular initiative. Because if you look at it, only 17% of US bank executives are committed. It's a low number, right? Because it is going to be interesting. Couple of other questions that came up in this research. Yeah, I talked about it earlier, right? Once you start opening things up, anytime you open something up, you have to protect it. It's so funny because uh, I was earlier today. I was in a jujitsu class, and my coach was telling me that talking about fluidity, right? And he was saying, me and him are going together. He's like way better than me. That's why he's my coach. And I was being very defensive. And he was like, in order to get better, you have to open up. But in opening up, there's risk to that. Like in jujitsu, it's me getting armbarred or choked. But in open banking is you getting breached, right? So some of the risks now, what are the potential risk and benefits for consumers with the shift to open banking? Risks include potential data security concerns if not properly managed. But they say the benefits are significant, including access to financial services, more competitive rates, personalized banking experience. There's also going to be consent. So it's not like, okay, we have this open banking initiative that comes off, and all of a sudden your data is just out there. You're going to have to, at certain points, you're going to be opted to consent in order to your data to have access. I mean, that's across the board in anything, and all the verticals right now, whether it's your financial data, whether it's your healthcare data, there's going to be some form of consent from the user. So just don't worry about that. Interesting stuff here. Another question that came up, right? What are some future developments we can expect in open banking in the US and globally? Expect to continue growth in the API-based financial services, expansion of open banking principles to wider financial products, and possibly new regulations that include business banking. Globally, markets like the EU and UK may serve as models for expanding open banking into open finance, covering a broader range of financial services. So that's definitely interesting. Like once again, right? These are just your personal accounts. These are not like business accounts. So definitely think as we expand in terms of open banking, the business accounts will definitely become part of that equation in the US. But I think we're a while from that. Um, and it's so funny because even though this has been going on globally for a while, the it seems like a totally it's just interesting. I just find it interesting for the fall. Seems like it's happening fast. in the US, but it's technically not, right? Because the whole concept of open banking has been going on since 2000. In some cases, I think even when it said 2016. So let's see some other, let's dig out some other, there's some other charts I want to show you guys that as part of the research. Let me add it to the stage. Give me a second. Open banking strategies, at US banks. So they have a couple of charts, right? They're saying that, so how many US banks just have, and this is obviously from the sample size that were were part of the survey, right? It's not everyone, but the statistics, right? Like I said, we are committed to providing open data access to third party. Like I said earlier, 17%. We are interested in working with select third party partners, 48%. Our strategy is dependent on our core provider, 20%. We have no open banking strategy, 6%. We are waiting for regulations to be published, 9%. Uh, Interesting stat there. See if there's any questions coming out. All right, let's see some more stuff. Oh, this is cool. Timeline of the US Open. We're gonna go through a timeline. Give it a second. Let me this up real quick. So it's pretty cool. So there's another chart that's just basically, it was showing the timeline of the US open banking ecosystem, right? 2007, MIT was launched. Uh, the Dodd-Frank was signed into law, 2010. 2013, Plaid is founded. 2016, the CFPB issues requests for information, just to understand it. 2017, the CFPB publishes consumer protection principles. 2020, CFPB releases an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. 2023, CFPB releases notice of proposed rulemaking, meaning that the notice that this initiative and regulation is going to come out, and the 2024 in the fall, the final rule is expected. So there's a chart that's part of the research that just shows like the timeline of the rise of consumer fintech, and you look at like yeah, most of these apps just came out over the last 15 years, decade or so. All right, hold up. Let's go and see what more. See some more stats we can find. Oh, this is cool. The key tenets of the CFPB's proposed rule. So access, right? So deposit accounts, credit cards, digital wallets, data that needs to be made available, transaction information, account balance, information to initiate payment, bill information, account verification information. So that's the access. They have control, limitations on collections, use, and retention of data, terms of disclosure of consumer authorization, understanding and management of authorization for third parties. So that's some control things they'll put in place. Security, right? The security, confidentiality, and integrity of data. So it's usually in security called the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. That's when they have confidentiality and integrity. Developer interfaces and API access. And yet, you know what? When you start talking about API, that's in general. That's a whole aspect that a lot of organizations are not running scans in their endpoint. So API security is a big thing. It's going to even get bigger now because you're basically, if a developer or another organization is getting access to data, that means a threat actor can too. So you have to make sure that these things are secure. So that's a whole other conversation. Uh, no use of credentials by third parties, tokenized account and routing numbers. So you probably won't see the actual account number. It'll be a token. That's what that means. Usability. Format of data is machine readable and consistent. Data is accurate and complete. So these are like the key components of the proposed rule set. Be interesting, as we start out. We did this show today based on an article that we came across. We found it interesting, so we just wanted to explore it. And that's part of what we're doing right now. It's just exploring this particular rule set. Other they say they have another chart here. Likely impact of the CFPB's open banking rule. Account data provider mandated to provide authorized third party with data access via API. Infrastructure service provider, codified access to consumer financial data, everything's via API. FinTech product or service, codified access to consumer financial data via API, limitations on data use and explicit privacy requirements. It's you know what, we had a show previously on privacy. It'll be interesting to see how that, like, different privacy standards play in to this open banking initiative. From the consumer standpoint, safely and securely use personal financial data with software and services. We're just saying, like, one of the charts of is basically breaking down the different stakeholders, we could call them, and how this ruling will impact. What I want to also give you guys, when we did this show on open banking from an expert who actually was part of getting it launched in Nigeria, that was a really good episode, really diving into open banking. So the name of the TFP show was "What's Open Banking and How Does It Work?" If you're interested in really like learning about it. I mean, we talked about open banking in general. Obviously, it was specific in terms of the initiative in Nigeria, but you can learn a lot about open banking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to that show on the chat. So if you want to rewatch it, if you want to have some questions on open banking, learn more about it, really good show. But yes, DG. Let me link on the yeah, so it's on YouTube under the Tech Behind FinTech page. What's open banking and how does it work? That was a previous show. Definitely informative if you want to learn more about open banking. He really broke it down in that episode. So I mean that was it. Look, guys, I thank you for joining. Oh, we have to, before we cut it, let me take a pause and we'll jump back into some questions. Let's do a quick message from our sponsors.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
All right, just like that, we are back. All right, cool. Let's start fielding some questions. See if there's some questions in the chat regarding things that we were talking about. Hold on, let me see. Also, there's some additional items we want to share. Oh, this was cool. So, data types and consumer use cases for open banking. So data from deposit and credit cards, transaction data, account data, customer data, balance data, bill data. So that's some of the things that everyone will have access to. They're saying that potential applications for this stuff: loan underwriting and experience, fraud mitigation and risk, account-to-account payments, some authentication, credit scoring, personal insights, and rewards, potential applications. But the most important things are the data types that will be part of this discussion. Interesting stuff here. All right, let's take that down. All right, let's field some questions. Hold up, let me look on the platforms to see if there are any questions regarding open banking. None that I see so far. See if there are additional items that we missed that we want to talk about as part of the research. I don't think so. I think that's it. Provided the past episode, if you want to dive into open banking, we had a really good conversation about that. That's part of the show episode right now. We talked about it. So you know what? I think we can close this episode out. Thank all you guys for viewing today's episode. And every Friday, 12 p.m., we are live at the Tech Behind FinTech. I think that is, give me a second. I'm just doing some housekeeping stuff here. I think that's it. I think that is a wrap for our show today. Thank you very much for your time. I'll catch you here next Friday at 12 p.m. Cheers.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.